Welcome everyone, it's Jeff Rich here from jeffrich.substack.com, the burning archive where you can learn more about history and quality world literature. And this is the next in my series of videos on 100 books to read before you die, or 100 books to read before it's too late. In this video, I'm looking at books 31 to 40, and let's get into it. This list is including some of the greatest masterpieces of dystopian fiction, of early 20th century fiction, including, of course, the great writer Franz Kafka. I went on a bit of a Franz Kafka tear in this part of the list. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into the books. First up, at number 31, I have Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. Aldous Huxley was part of a very distinguished English intellectual family, and he published Brave New World in 1932. Although many people talk about, of course, 1984, which I'll get to in a moment, Huxley predicts a different kind of dystopian future in which I guess we're all controlled not so much through fear and surveillance as pleasure and our own self-indulgence. It is looking at a future in 2540 CE in which the world state has eliminated war, poverty and unhappiness through genetic engineering, psychological conditioning and a wonder drug called soma. Citizens are bred in laboratories and sorted into castes. Everyone has a job, everyone has sex, everyone takes their soma when they feel uncomfortable. It's a perfect society as long as you don't mind giving up freedom, art, religion and authentic emotion. Some people would say it is a more accurate prediction of the kind of internet consumer society we all live in than 1984. It is a fascinating understanding of, I guess, what Herbert Marcuse once called permissive tolerance. Absolutely a brilliant book to read, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. At number 32, we have George Orwell's 1984, the complementary dystopian vision of a world controlled by surveillance. George Orwell was a master of English prose, of clear English prose, and his book 1984, of course, is a classic that I guess everyone knows of. I remember myself living through the entry of the world into 1984 and the constant discussion of, well, have we actually achieved this now? In recent times, it seemed that we are perhaps also entering into 1984 again with slogans like war is peace, ignorance is strength, and so on, returning to the political stage. Orwell published 1984 in 1949. 1984 is a reversal of 4 and 8, and it has defined a lot of our thinking of controlled societies. Big Brother, doublethink, newspeak, thought crime. The story follows Winston Smith, a low-level worker at the Ministry of Truth, who rewrites historical records to match the party's current version of reality. He secretly rebels by keeping a diary, having a love affair with Julia, but in Oceania, even your thoughts belong to the state. It is, of course, a classic work, well worth revisiting, even though it is so well known and so ingrained, and arguably captured one side of the modern world that we moved into, just as Huxley caught another side of it. Book 33, the third in this video, is also by George Orwell. It is Homage to Catalonia. This is a book about the Spanish Civil War, and it's a demonstration of Orwell's talent as a writer of reportage, of journalism, if you like, of realistic non-fiction rather than fictional stories like 1984 or Animal Farm. He published Homage to Catalonia in 1938. It was his account of his experiences during the Spanish Civil War that broke out in 1936. His involvement there with radical militias who were fighting against Franco's sort of phalangist or fascists. Absolutely brilliant book that describes the way in which political idealism can conflict with reality. I remember reading this as part of my study of the Spanish Civil War back in my student days at university. I must bring it out again sometime. It is, again, a wonderful demonstration of the clarity of Orwell's observations, the insights he had, the compassionate insights he had into the emotional issues, the psychological issues beneath political rhetoric, and also his understanding of the limitations of ideologies of both the left and the right. Book 34, fourth of this video, is Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. Nikolai Gogol is a great Russian writer, some might say Ukrainian writer, but let's say he is a Russian writer. We can all put aside that kind of nonsense now. He published Dead Souls in 1842, and it is a satire, I guess, a comic satire, a humane satire of the bureaucracy, but also the social system in Imperial Russia in the 19th century. It is a grotesque comedy of that system. It's not necessarily realistic, but it highlights stupidity, corruption, and some of the strange way in which the serfs of Russia, the dead souls of the title, were traded like, commodities, like mere numbers, like dead souls. The plot involves Pavel Chichikov, a middle-aged conman who travels through rural Russia buying legal rights to dead serfs who are still listed as alive on official records. One might say perhaps there is a connection there with current-day Ukraine. His plan is to use these dead souls as collateral for a massive loan and then disappear with the money. And along the way, he encounters the officials, the paperwork, the scams, the various landowners, misers, fantasists, brutal pragmatists, and sentimental fools. He had meant to write this book, be part of a broader trilogy showing Russia's spiritual redemption, but Gogol never completed it. In fact, he burnt the manuscript of the second part of Dead Souls. And Gogol, whether through Dead Souls or through his other stories like The Nose, The Overcoat and others, is well worth reading. And one day soon I'll be reading Gogol in Russian myself, and I really look forward to that. Book 35, the fifth of this video, is Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, English social comedy, published in 1813. Of course, many movies and television shows have been made of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Do I even really need to tell you the story? But it is, a precise social observation about the minor gentry of rural England, caught between aristocracy and a rising middle class, commercial middle class and industrial middle class. The story follows Elizabeth Bennet, a young woman from a respectable but not wealthy family who is working her way through the marriage market of Regency England. She meets Mr. Darcy, proud, wealthy, but with mutual prejudices that create conflict and misunderstanding. And we all know the different stories. We all have our favourite Mr. Darcy's in performances. It is a great, great book. It's been a long time since I read Jane Austen. I read Jane Austen really in my teens and 20s, but absolutely well worth a read. Of course, it's many people's favourite novel of all time. The sixth book, Book 36, is less well known. It's by the Portuguese writer Fernando Pessoa, a Portuguese writer who himself wrote under many different names, pseudonyms, what he called heteronyms. And his kind of prose novel book is called The Book of Disquiet. It is an extraordinary book, extraordinary also for the fact that in a way it was never really completed. It's made out of fragments like many modernist works of the 20th century and even 21st century. And it was in fact never really published as a complete work until 1982. Nearly 50 years after Pessoa's death. Pessoa was something of a mystery and a tragic figure, a great poet, a great writer. He used these multiple heteronyms or literary personalities, each with their own sort of biography and philosophy and writing style. And in the Book of Disquiet, he uses one of those, Bernardo Soares, as a version of Pessoa himself. It consists of fragments, diary entries, philosophical reflections, poetic meditations by Soares, who's an assistant bookkeeper in a Lisbon office. Lisbon, of course, the capital of Portugal. When Pessoa was writing this in the sort of early first half of the 20th century, the centre of a still not insignificant commercial empire. And the Book of Disquiet includes his reflections and meditations. It is extraordinary. It's a very different read to Jane Austen or even George Orwell. And it is one that you can take in fragments. You don't have to read it, from cover to end, all in one reading. It's a different kind of reading experience, one where one's plumbing, strange thoughts and difficult psychological moments, rather than falling in love with a story, falling in love with characters. Something similar, perhaps something similarly dystopian, comes through in the seventh book, Book 37, by Franz Kafka. Well, it's kind of a book. It was one of the few works published by Kafka in his lifetime. The archetypal Kafka story, short story novella, The Metamorphosis. It was published in 1915, a few years before Kafka's death, and after the start of World War I. And of course, it has one of literature's great opening lines. As Grigor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. Part dream world, part, story of alienation, part psychological projection. It is, of course, one of Kafka's great pieces of literary imagination. Kafka was part of a German-speaking Jewish family in Prague who felt very much like an outsider. Was a lawyer working in the, workers' insurance, occupational health insurance type agency in Germany in Prague in the late 19th century. And the story follows Grigor's transformation as an insect, as a bug, and its impact on his family. Most people will have heard this, heard of this story You should absolutely read this story. It is one of the great pieces of just literary invention. Book 8 is also Book 38 is also by Franz Kafka. It is The Castle, Das Schloss. If you go to Prague, the Hradci Castle there, I think that's how you say it, the castle in the centre of Prague, you can actually go to the alleyway at the back of the castle where Kafka and his family lived for a time. And in the castle, he created another extraordinary imaginative fable of modern life and living with bureaucracy. He never finished this novel like Pessoa. It was published posthumously, against his will to some degree, in 1926. And it is an extraordinary story where K, a land surveyor, arrives in a village to take up his position, only to discover no one can confirm his appointment. The castle, which looms over the village and supposedly employs him, is forever inaccessible. And the whole novel, Kay is trying to reach these enigmatic authorities to validate his existence, but encountering complex, contradictory bureaucracy. It becomes an extraordinary vision, an extraordinary symbol, not just of bureaucracy, but of something much greater and something troublingly psychological, troublingly existential about the way in which we interact with authority, with organised life, with our own sense of searching for validation. The 39th book in the series is also by Franz Kafka. As I said, I've gone on a bit of a Kafka tear here. Perhaps less commonly read and perhaps arguably outside of the novel genre, but I recommend you read Kafka's Parables and Diaries. And many of the parables are actually drawn from the fragments, the notes he wrote in his diaries. The parables are gathered together in some collections, and of course the diaries have been published in completely and reviewed in many years. They recount both his vision, some of the parables, similar to his sort of novels, almost like compressed novels. There's a famous one called Before the Law, which tells of a man who spends his entire life waiting for permission to enter a gate, only to learn at his death that the gate was meant only for him. And similarly, you should really definitely read all of Kafka's extraordinary short stories and parables, and his diaries are his extraordinary tortured experience of writing and existence. Many of these phrases he has written in the diaries, in the parables, have found their way into quotations. Once he wrote, "A book must be the axe for the frozen sea inside us." And reading Kafka is, I guess, one of the great experiences. A more conventional and a 19th century novel is book 40, and the final of the 10 books in this video. It's Herman Melville's Moby Dick, the great American novel, absolutely worth reading. Published in 1851, it is a story of whaling, but of many other things, of revenge, obsession, fate, nature, the limits of human understanding, of a kind of spiritual quest in its own way. Melville himself travelled on whaling ships, and there are characters from around the world who feature in this story. Famously, it's narrated by Ishmael. The story begins, "Call me Ishmael." who joins the crew of a boat called the Pequod under Captain Ahab, and Ahab is obsessed with killing Moby Dick, the white whale that destroyed his leg in a previous encounter. And what begins as a commercial whaling voyage becomes a monomaniacal quest for revenge against nature itself. And in a way, it's almost an archetypal expression of the United States of America. It is a brilliant novel. I'm sure especially my American viewers will have heard of this novel. Highly recommend you to read it. I hope this list is providing you with some great suggestions for literature. Go over to my Substack at jeffrich.substack.com if you want to read the whole list of 100 books to read before it's too late. You can also read my 100 poems to read in times of war, and all my other works, including my guide to every one of 121 winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature, and my writing on world history and world affairs. Do join me at jeffrich.substack.com, and I'll see you in the next video.